Before we begin, take a slow breath and imagine the desert at night 2,000 years ago. The air is cool, the sky is endless. A young rabbi walks beneath the stars, his sandals brushing against ancient stone. Around his neck, or tucked into the folds of his garment, something small and unassuming rests against his skin. Not gold, not silver, not a weapon, but a stone. Now here's the question that has fascinated mystics, historians, and spiritual seekers for centuries. If Jesus Christ walked through villages plagued by fear, illness, and what people described as unclean spirits, would he have carried something from the earth itself for protection? Stay with me, because tonight we're diving into one crystal, a stone so common it hides in plain sight, yet so powerful in lore and lived experience that it has been called a shield against darkness for thousands of years. And if you place it under your pillow tonight, many traditions claim, it creates a boundary between your mind and whatever moves in the unseen. The stone is amethyst. Let's unpack why. Amethyst wasn't rare in the ancient world. In fact, the Middle East was one of its most active trade regions. Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Levant all used it. Archaeologists have found amethyst beads and amulets in burial sites that predate Christianity by over 1,000 years. It was believed to calm the mind, ward off intoxication, and protect the spirit from intrusion. But here's where it gets more interesting. In the book of Exodus, when the high priest's breastplate is described, the Hoshin, 12 stones are named, each representing a tribe of Israel. Amethyst is listed among them. Later, in the book of Revelation, amethyst appears again as one of the foundation stones of the New Jerusalem. It's one of the very few crystals mentioned explicitly in the Bible. That repetition is not random. In ancient Jewish mysticism, stones weren't decorative. They were vibrational identifiers, spiritual conductors. They were believed to hold resonance, to align human consciousness with divine order. Amethyst in particular was associated with clarity of mind, protection from deception, and purification of thought. Now think about the stories of shadow entities, figures at the edge of vision, oppressive presences during sleep, feelings of heaviness or dread in the night. Across cultures, these experiences have different names. In Jewish folklore, there are dybbuk. In early Christian writings, there are references to oppressive spirits. In Islamic tradition, jinn. In medieval Europe, the nightmare spirit that sits on the chest during sleep. Modern psychology explains many of these experiences as sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, or trauma responses. But here's what's fascinating. Across all of those cultures, the solution often includes three things: prayer, light, and stone. Amethyst was worn by early Christian bishops. In fact, even today, many bishops' rings contain amethyst. It symbolized spiritual authority over lower forces, not dominance through violence, but through clarity, through purity. Why clarity? Because darkness, metaphorical or psychological, thrives in confusion, in fear, in fragmentation. Amethyst is quartz infused with iron and natural radiation from the earth. Its purple color ranges from pale lavender to deep violet, a color historically associated with royalty and spiritual sovereignty. The ancients believed purple represented the bridge between heaven and earth. There's a reason for that psychologically. Purple sits between red, grounding, physical, and blue, calming, expansive. It's literally the spectrum's meeting point of body and spirit. When placed under a pillow, amethyst is said to influence the dream state. Modern crystal practitioners claim it stabilizes brainwave patterns during REM sleep. Now, science doesn't confirm that crystals emit measurable fields strong enough to alter brain chemistry directly. But what it does confirm is that belief, ritual, and tactile anchors significantly affect the nervous system. When you hold something with intention, your body responds. Your parasympathetic nervous system activates, heart rate slows, cortisol lowers, and fear-based dream cycles decrease. So whether you interpret shadow entities as literal beings or as manifestations of subconscious stress, trauma, or suppressed emotion, the result is the same. Amethyst becomes a signal to your brain that you are protected, and the brain listens. There are apocryphal Christian texts, not included in the canonical Bible, that describe Jesus retreating to solitary places for prayer before confronting intense spiritual oppression in others. We don't have a verse that says, "He carried amethyst." Let's be clear about that. But we do know the cultural context. He lived in a region where protective stones were common. Trade routes through Syria and Egypt moved amethyst regularly. Jewish mystics used stones as spiritual identifiers, and the early church adopted amethyst as a symbol of spiritual vigilance and sobriety. Sobriety not just from alcohol, but from illusion. The Greek word amethystos literally means not intoxicated by fear, not intoxicated by deception, not intoxicated by darkness. Now imagine this. You're lying in bed tonight. The room is quiet. The mind begins to drift. That in-between state, where shapes form in shadow, where thoughts become images, that's where many people report encounters with shadow figures. Neurologists call it the hypnagogic state. It's a threshold state, and threshold states have always been considered spiritually sensitive. Amethyst has long been placed under pillows specifically for this reason, to guard the threshold. In medieval Europe, travelers carried amethyst to avoid being led astray by spirits of the night. In Tibetan traditions, purple stones were used in meditation to shield against psychic disturbance. Even in modern paranormal investigation communities, amethyst is one of the most commonly recommended protective stones. But here's the grounded truth. The stone itself is not a magic talisman. It's a tool. The real mechanism is coherence. When you place amethyst under your pillow, you're making a declaration. This space is safe. My mind is clear. My rest is protected. And intention, combined with physical ritual, changes neural pathways over time. If you struggle with vivid nightmares, intrusive thoughts at night, or a sense of presence when alone in darkness, this practice does two things simultaneously. First, it gives your body something solid, cold, grounding, real. Second, it gives your subconscious a boundary marker. Throughout history, boundaries repel chaos. Even Jesus, when confronting what people described as demonic forces, responded not with panic, but with authority, clarity, calm. Amethyst symbolizes that state. There's one more detail most people miss. Quartz crystals, including amethyst, have piezoelectric properties. Under pressure, they generate a small electrical charge. That's why quartz is used in watches and electronics to stabilize frequency. Now think metaphorically. Stability, frequency, timekeeping. Ancient people didn't know the word piezoelectric, but they observed that quartz felt different, that it seemed to hold energy, that it amplified intention during prayer. If Jesus carried any stone at all, and we cannot prove that he did, amethyst would have made sense culturally, symbolically, and spiritually. It represented vigilance without aggression, protection without violence, authority without fear. So tonight, if you decide to try this, don't just toss a random purple rock under your pillow and hope for magic. Hold it. Breathe slowly. Set a clear intention. Something simple. Only what serves light and truth may enter my rest. Whether shadow entities are literal beings, archetypal projections, or neurological artifacts, this practice strengthens one thing undeniably real: your internal boundary. And darkness, in every tradition, retreats before a firm boundary. For 2,000 years, amethyst has been associated with spiritual sobriety and protection. It sits quietly in the foundations of sacred texts. It rests in the rings of bishops. It appears in desert trade routes that Jesus himself would have walked. Maybe the power isn't in the stone alone. Maybe it's in what the stone represents. Clarity in the face of fear, light in the presence of shadow, and the refusal to be spiritually intoxicated by darkness. So if tonight feels heavy, if your dreams have been restless, if the edges of your room sometimes feel closer than they should, place the stone beneath your pillow. Not as superstition, but as a symbol, a declaration, a quiet echo of an ancient practice that says, this space is sovereign, and nothing without permission may enter.